Awesome. So, hi, my name is Vikki
Right.
Coombes, and I am here talking with Yannick Jacob about having multiple passions. So, I thought what we'd do to start, Yannick, is for you to um, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are, but also when you came to realize you were a person with multiple passions and what that meant for you.
Right. Well, if you ask a person, a multi-potentialite or person with multiple potentials to introduce themselves, how long do I have?
Well, we've got about 30 to 45 minutes. Let's see how we go.
Cool. Great. Well, I'm Yannick Jacob. I am a multi-potentialite, and that's a term I've only found out a couple of years ago when I saw that TED Talk by Emily Wapnick. Which I'm sure multi-potentialites are familiar with. But if you're not, look it up. I think it's called Why Some People Don't Have One True Calling. That kind of changed something for me. Also, there was an experience with my very first coach who introduced me to the term portfolio career. And that was a game changer for me, because I realized, oh, there's other people that have multiple passions, that don't want to do just one thing. So now I focused my efforts on a couple of things: coaching, personal development, growth, helping people develop and think and understand and live life with more passion, more ownership, more consciously. That's kind of the umbrella term for the work that I do. So within that, I'm a coach. I specialize on positive psychology and existentialism. So I kind of brought that together in true multi-passion style, integrated what I've been passionate about, because I've been studying positive psychology. I've been studying existentialism and coaching, with life business coaching. So I like helping. I like that close psychological contact with people. I like that trusting relationship that you build when you have one-to-one conversations. And if they're focused on what a person wants to achieve or what a person wants to understand, any kind of change they want to create, that's a fantastic process that immediately I realized is aligned with all of my strengths. So I came into that through like a background in audio engineering. So I've done a little bit of music work. I've always been into art. I've been DJing a lot in my time, and I figured out whether I can make that a career. And then I realized, well, that's a long story, but I realized that's not the ideal career for me. I realized, if you ask me, when did I think, when did I become that person with multiple passions? I think I've always been that.
Yeah.
I've always tried lots of different sports, even within DJing that I've done for like 20 years. Within that, I've explored all of the different areas. So then I studied psychology, and within my psychology degree, I focused on, I don't know, 15 or 20 different subjects. Some people know exactly what they want to do. Like, I want to be a therapist, so I'm going to study everything psychology related that's related to therapy.
Yeah.
For me, I did lots of different things. So I had a bit of a dabble in neuroscience, and then I looked at developmental psychology. Then there was a lot of drugs, behavior, addiction that I studied. And then I kind of realized through an exploration of what my particular strengths are, curiosity, interest in the world, adapting to things very quickly, an appreciation of love and beauty and excellence. All of these came together within coaching and within therapy, within that close psychological contact with people and helping them to figure stuff out. So that's what I focused on. So now I do coaching, I do a bit of mediation, conflict resolution, which is using the same foundational skills of building a relationship and helping people to explore themselves and their relationship with the world and themselves and other people. I do a bit of leadership development. So again, this is sitting down with people and helping them explore their relationship with themselves and the world and how they can be better leaders. And I train a lot. I train and supervise. So about half of my clients these days are other coaches, and I help them through a similar process to become better coaches. So in that process of looking at all of these different areas of my profession or what I do professionally, I started to create an approach that would allow me to wear all of these professional hats.
Yeah.
So I developed what I call rocket supervision, which is an approach to work with coaches who want to either take off, if you figure that if you're on Earth, and you haven't launched yet, then you need an element of training, you need an element of mentoring, you need an element of tutoring, or having somebody who might be more experienced, who can put a lot of stuff on the table and perhaps teach you a few things. But as soon as you're in orbit, you know what kind of coach, what kind of practitioner you are. You really don't need somebody to tell you what to do, because you know what to do. You found your style, you found yourself. And then it's a process of supervision, of coaching, of perhaps elements of counseling, to just kind of keep you in orbit or change orbit, but help you make your own decisions.
Yeah.
So I put all of this together. I like integration. I've always been integrating, and I think that's what multi-potentialites do. And I'm very happy with that. I'm happy that I was able to build a career based on multiple passions and broad knowledge. Sometimes I compare it to like some people want to climb a tree and they want to get to the very top.
Yeah.
And when they're at the top, they reached mastery. But like I'm more interested in the foundations of the forest, because you can explore lots of different kinds of vegetation and trees and bushes, and you get a sense for all of the foundations. You're able to bring them together, because you climbed up lots of different trees a little bit, and you were able to look at the top and what it might be looking like if you climbed all the way up. But it needs people like us, I think, to be able to look at how things connect and interrelate and then bring them together. I think a lot of innovation comes from people like that, who are able to not just master one skill in isolation, but to actually make the connections between lots of different skills.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was something there around, you talked about knowing your strengths, right? And some of the strengths that you spoke about, I see as very much strengths of people like us, people with multiple passions, ever changing, curious, almost a need for change, right? We need variety and change in our lives. Otherwise we begin to kind of, well, I know for myself, I begin to, I suppose it almost go down that depression line, really. I begin to feel caged and drawn in if I don't have a level of variety and change in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've had a consultation once with a marketing guy, somebody who helps people scale their business. And to me, it felt time that perhaps I get some professional help, because for me, it was, I struggle more with like putting a strategy in place and then making that happen.
Okay.
Because like I branch out because, well, I might wake up tomorrow and I feel really called to do a certain task. That is really not in line with growing that one arm of my business most effectively and with the most speed.
Yeah.
So I've talked to this guy, and he seemed to be quite successful, and he seemed to help lots of people to be quite successful. And basically what he said is like, look, what I would do with you is strip away everything that distracts you from your main mission, figure out the one thing that you want to grow, and then put all of your energy into that one thing. And I thought to myself, yeah, that would definitely work. And I would be very successful very quickly. And I would probably make lots of money. And I would be miserable.
Yeah.
Because if I focus everything on one thing and every day I only do one thing, I mean, it's a bit simplistic because you never do just one thing. But if I put all of my effort into one area of interest, then I'm not going to be happy, because I'm going to miss having the variety and the range and the diversity. I really like that. And actually within my coaching, that allows me to have all of these interests, because every client is very different. Even within my coaching work, I don't just work with senior leaders in the insurance industry who are male and in their 50s.
Yeah.
There's certain patterns of how people experience themselves. There's more commonalities within a certain demographic. But no, I mean, I chose the existential and the happiness work quite consciously, because I know it allows me to work with the similar themes, but across a whole range of different people, different stories. And it's so rich what comes out of different people. You know, I love that, you know, one day I'm dealing with procrastination and the other day there's an existential crisis. And then the next day somebody wants to figure out what their strengths are so that they can feel more engaged at work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that's great. I love that I was able to find a profession that allows me to have this common theme of like existentialism or like existential issues or positive psychology themes. But within that, there's a multitude of different things that I'm able to listen to and I'm able to integrate.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also, so one of the things I work with my clients around is firstly finding out, because I do primarily work with people who are, well, what I call hummingbirds, right? So multi-potentialite, there are so many different terms now.
I love that, by the way.
And
I love the hummingbird in the back.
Yeah, a little hummingbird. And in the last week, I've seen another one that was in the BBC, actually, it's a BBC article referring to slashies.
Slashies?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That sounds like serial killer.
Exactly. But it was that, you know, when people say, what do you do? And you say, I'm a coach / a consultant / a trainer / yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I was like, no. But we are, I think, my feeling, certainly in the last 2 years, is that media is catching up, right? And there's more conversation happening within media, whether it's video, written, whatever, about people with multiple passions and highlighting that you can do a career differently. Mm-hmm. Personally, I feel that is because over the last 15 years, business has had to change. Mm-hmm. Right? So there's still a strong belief amongst people with multiple passions that they're struggling to have successful careers because they believe that the world is still set up for what they call specialists. Mm-hmm. You know, and they talk about career ladders and all this kind of stuff. And I've worked globally across multiple industries for the last 15 to 20 years. And that's not true. It hasn't been true for a really long time. You know, when you enter a company now, they'll talk to you about your career pathway. They will not talk to you about your career ladder. It doesn't matter what industry you go into now. And also, you know, back in the day, to be an expert in a particular field, you had to do 20 years in order to be considered an expert. Well, right. Even in, you know, so I used to work in the energy industry, for instance. It's one of the industries I've worked within, and they used to have that very much. You had to be, say, a geologist for 20 years before you were considered an expert in your field. But as one of the reasons I was there was to help them work out how do they shorten that and make it half that time. How do you become an expert with the same depth of knowledge and experience, well, skill sets? I mean, you're not going to have 20 years experience in 10 years, but how do you do that in 10 years? So that was all changing. And even within that, they were looking at people aren't going to stay in the same field.
Well, I think it depends on what field it is or what you're looking to be an expert in. For example, as I mentioned, within coaching is something where you need to integrate because it's such a broad range of skills you need to bring together. You know, building a relationships, there's technical skills, there's so many things that come together that you can know about. Plus, you don't have to have all the answers. But in something like an athlete, for example, a world athlete, if they dabble into other sports or perhaps into other areas that are not sports, you know, yes, it will benefit you to some extent because there's transferable skills there. But like, if you're not working, if you compare yourself to somebody who's working every day on their technique in, let's say, hurdle running or in hammer throwing or in canoeing or in skiing, you know, yes, if you're skiing or you're snowboarding, transferable skills are how do I deal with challenges and how do I keep my inner game strong? You know, how do I deal with self-doubt and confidence? But when it comes to technique, you know, then somebody will have a clear advantage if they train that technique every single day and they're super dedicated and they do nothing but, you know. So I think it really depends on the kind of work that we choose. And that is why it's so important for somebody who has multiple passions to figure something out that would bring many of their interests together under one hat. You know, my coaching hat brings a lot of things together, but like I left out a lot of interests that I have. You know, yes, the DJing, for example, gives me a lot of insight into mixing, you know, into integrating, into bringing different parts of your life together. There's so many metaphors in that I've been able to use to understand life and people. But like the actual skill of making one record run as fast as another, which I spent hours and hours and hours on, it doesn't like that. The motor skills of my fingers doing a crab and scratching are not going to help me in my coaching work.
Well, not yet. Who knows?
I could have spent that time reading the personal development books or academic textbooks, you know.
But there's also something there for me though around when I think about both of us, because both of us have created careers now that integrate a whole lot of different things we've done in our lives. Mm-hmm. But also we didn't rush to that, right? So when I look back,
True.
You know, I'm now in my 5th career, right? I'm obviously in my only professional journey, but I'm in my 5th career, mm-hmm. which is around that entrepreneurship, around that integrating of various things into a business. But even then, I'm not sitting there going, this is going to be me for the next 30 years, right? I'm like, this is me for now. And I'm already exploring what other options I might put alongside that or morph this into or whatever. Mm-hmm. But it's also, you know, I kind of over that first 15 to 20 years of my professional journey, I did a variety of different things. Mm-hmm. And a good 10 years of that, 12 years, probably a bit longer, I fell into consulting, which allowed me, a bit like coaching does, allowed me to do a whole lot of different things with different clients in different industries. So it met that need for variety and change. And I was constantly learning, which is also something I think is a core thing across all people with multiple passions, is it's part of that change, I think, that variety, but we also love learning, we love new, we love to explore something new. And you mentioned just then because there's also this, not necessarily amongst those of us who are people with multiple passions, but often we hear it from those who are not looking at our lives, that they look at us and say, but you just do things at a surface level. And I'm like, well, no, you just mentioned yourself, you know, when you got into DJing and when you were mastering that skill, you spent hours learning how to do the mix and how to, you know, and there are interests that I've only done a surface level skim across. Mm-hmm. There are also things that I've gone, wow, and jumped into, explored.
And I think that's something that drives us, no? It's like, it's not that we do everything on surface level. It's like we dive deep, but in periods of our lives. Mm. You know, we're very dedicated to something, but then we move on. Yeah. You know, but we don't move on and leave everything behind. We take a lot with us that we have learned about this. Like I said, there's so many transferable skills and the knowledge which allow us to integrate.
Yeah.
And I think something profound has changed also in recent times, because I was lucky enough, for example, to study coaching coming from university. You know, very early in my life, I was able to choose personal development as my first career, when that's still kind of rare. But so that the landscape of education has changed. And I think the internet and the interconnectedness of the world has had a profound impact on multi-potentialites or multi-passionates to live aligned with how they're wired. You know, because it was a very accepted belief that you need to be a master. Don't be a jack of all trades. You know, because then you're a master of none. Mm-hmm. And that is so ingrained still in culture, but certainly a lot less than it used to be.
Yeah,
I can't imagine somebody like 30 years ago going a similar career path than I have. And yes, some people looked at me funny when I told them that I'm going to study happiness now in London. You know, and then I moved on to in the opposite direction and like studied all the existential void and the dread and the anxieties, you know, but then brought that together, which made perfect sense to me. But it takes somebody to dive deep into seemingly unrelated things to figure out what the parallels and the common ground is, and then bring them together. And I think the internet has changed a lot to just see other people doing things differently. And you're like, if Emily Wapnick can do things differently, I could do things differently. And, you know, if Vikki here is on Facebook streaming live and somebody's watching this and they felt, oh no, but like the messages from my childhood and society have always been, I need to work hard on one thing and become a master, and then I'm an expert, and then I have a good career. And here's two people talking who don't do that, and they still seem to have good careers. That's really inspiring, and I think that's why it's so important that we're talking and that more people put themselves out there and admit that they have different interests. You know, I used to hide that I'm DJing because I thought, well, everybody's just going to think I'm partying a lot because there's the stereotype of people who DJ, you know, and that's not going to be good for the people who might want to hire me.
Yeah.
You know, and at some point you develop the courage to actually show yourself as you are and be very authentic about it. And, you know, yes, I have all of these different things going on, and bring them together. You know, how often with a client have I talked about skiing or snowboarding, and when you're in the mountain, and some of the most profound metaphors have come out of activities that seemingly have nothing to do with what we're talking about, you know, but they have everything to do with what we're talking about. So that's why I think it's important to live your multiple passions and not hide them. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's also, so there's something there, like one of the other challenges a lot of people face around this, right? It's great that we're both sitting here going, you know, pursue all of your stuff. But one of the other things, and again, this is a discussion I have with a lot of my clients, is absolutely pursue multiple passions, right? However, no matter who you are and in what field you're in. So you were talking earlier about someone who's going to be a successful sports person needs to have that focus and dedication and discipline. My thing is, whoever you are as a human becoming, if you want to be successful in anything, whether it's about integrating something and creating something new and putting it out there in the world, or being part of a more traditional career but still doing well within that, everyone, no matter who you are, whether you're a specialist or a multi-potentialite, a hummingbird, you need to have a certain level of discipline about what you choose to follow, right? So we both have businesses. There are things that need to be done for a business that do not in any way, shape or form turn me on, right? They're not exciting to me. I don't find them interesting, but in order for the business to run, they need to be done, right? And at the moment, the person who has to do that is me. That's not my long-term plan, but at the moment, that's the reality. And so I've had to sit there and go, okay, when do I put my schedule, right? And I do schedule it because otherwise it very quickly becomes at the bottom of the pile and I never get around to it until suddenly I get a knock on the door, right, from my accountant or whatever, saying, where is that bit of paper?
And I think that's something, sorry, no, go on.
But it's that piece around weaving your multiple passions into a life you love still requires a level of routine, a level of discipline, sometimes a level of sacrifice. Sometimes there's a moment where you go, I really want to pursue that new shiny thing, but I've made a commitment to myself and to others that I'm going to do this. And so I'm going to see that through, you know, regardless of how nice and pretty that shiny thing is. So,
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like the marshmallow experiment thing, you know, discipline is freedom. Self-regulation allows you to have more benefit later on, you know, but there's a very profound decision in there. And anytime I work with somebody, and first of all, I needed to work with me. And I worked a lot with my coaches to figure out, okay, because there's a choice in there, right? I needed to make peace with any one of those passions that I have to grow significantly slower than they could be, because I choose to pursue other passions too. You know, the first time I made business cards, I think I designed 15 and I felt I had to print 8. You know?
Yeah, so I've got 4.
Yeah, right. Okay. In the end, I kind of managed to bring them together under a certain header, but like, I mean, that's besides the point. The point here is that you need to choose what you focus your energy on. If I would follow that advice that this business person gave me, and only focus on growing one arm of my business, that arm of my business would grow phenomenally quick, you know, but because I pursue 2-3 other arms as well, they're all gonna grow slower. And that's okay with me. That has to be okay with me. If it's not okay with me, I need to use some of that discipline and self-regulation and, you know, pursue that more. So I think existentially, this is all a choice. We need to choose how we want to live our lives. I could be more financially successful and have less quality of life in relation to my multi-potentialite passion. But like, I could also, I chose to grow multiple arms simultaneously and have a better experience and go more with my multi-passionate flow.
Yeah.
But I did make peace with either one of those arms growing slower than they could be.
Yeah. And I'm with you on that, I mean, I had similar conversations about my business, you know, very much. And even the first couple of times people talked about niching, you know, I was kind of like, but actually I found one of the biggest changes for me in my business as a person with multiple passions, because that first 6 to 8 months, I was juggling everything because I could have been anything, right? My business could have been anything. I could have been anything. And I did get a business mentor, and I worked with her for 6 months. And one of the first things she says to me, which completely switched things around for me, was your business shouldn't be about what you can do. Mm-hmm. It should be about who you are. Mm-hmm. And I just went, whoa, okay. Because I mean, as I said, I've worked in the public sector, I've worked in the voluntary sector, I've worked in corporate, I've worked in small, big, you know, and at no point in any of my professional journey has who I am mattered to my employers, right? Mm-hmm. It's always very much about what I can do for them. And so for me, that was such a mind swivel. Mm-hmm. But it meant when I stepped into that, I went, aha, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Suddenly this opens doors. Yeah.
I totally agree. And I had two very similar moments. One was the exact same moment when my supervisor, who's also a multipotentialite, a hummingbird, she told me, look, people hire me for who I am, for what I stand for, my beliefs, my values. They know they can trust me. And they also know I have multiple skills. So sometimes I started a professional relationship with an organization, and I came in to do some coaching. And then they had a workplace dispute and a conflict. And then they also brought me in as a mediator because, you know, they also know I do that. There was another very profound moment when somebody told me and really switched my view on what niching actually means. Mm-hmm. Because yes, a niche can be who you are, a niche can be what you do, but a niche can also be, and this is usually the traditional way of seeing niche. When I hear niche, people mean, who do you work with?
Yeah.
You know, the particular demographic. But it could also be a particular problem that you solve across demographics.
Yeah.
So you have who you work with, what you're solving or what you help people to achieve. And then you have the kind of tactics or the kind of technique or the kind of process that you use. For example, existential coaching is a niche. But it's an approach that I use, you know, positive psychology, evidence-based science using interventions and exercises and these kind of things. That's also a particular niche. But like, yes, if you have multiple passions, you yourself, you're the niche.
Yeah.
You can always do that because nobody's quite like you unless you desperately try to fit in.
Yeah.
And who was it? Brené Brown? Somebody told me that fitting in is the opposite of connecting, of belonging.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. Like, I mean, I've definitely had moments in my life where that's what I've tried to do, right? But even as I've been trying to do that, there's been a huge part of me going, what are you doing? You know, and really kind of fighting it. So there's been this internal conflict, and I've often ended up being miserable because I'm not being all that I could be. And when I moved into consulting and I was recruited by Accenture, I was very excited about that because Accenture is huge, right? It's a massive organization. Whilst I was there, it's global. It's very much a global organization. The whole point of it is that as a consultant, I theoretically could walk into any office in the world and know exactly how to do things, where to do it, etc., because we all followed the same way of doing things, the Accenture way. But I was really excited by the idea that this was a massive organization with so many different things it was doing, that I would have this amazing opportunity. And absolutely, I stuck it out for 3.5 years, which for me at the time was, wow, like it blasted through my forever, which was 2 years. It was the longest I'd ever been employed by anybody, et cetera, et cetera. It wasn't really, I mean, I kind of knew while I was there that I was fighting constantly to be able to be me. and to stretch my wings and to do different things. But it wasn't until I came out of that and was a couple of years later, as I was looking back at it, that I went, they were so boxing me. It might have been a box made of foam, but it was still a box. And they were very specific, particularly when I first started, they were really specific about what they were bringing me in to do. And everything else that I said, but I can do all of these other things too. And I have, within my professional career, done all these other things too. And they're like, no, this is what we want you for. Here's what you're here to do. And I just remember, so I tried, right? I tried fitting in, and I was that, it wasn't a really deep depression or anything, but it was kind of as I stepped out of that and I began to feel free again, I realized how much of me I'd been holding back and stifling. And I suddenly went, wow, actually there is so much more to me to bring to the world, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And but the thing is that it does work, you know, if you are associated with one thing. And very often, I mean, I have a client who's just moved into an organization and just kind of finding their feet within that organization. And the advice that she was getting is like, well, choose one thing that you're really passionate about, and then put yourself out there as such, so people start associating your name with that thing, you know. And lots of people will tell you that. It's like even people with multiple passions, like Simon Sinek, oh, he's the start with why guy, you know, or like Apple, they're the challenging the status quo people, or like, you know, if you have a thing attached to your name, people remember you, and then that makes it easy for you to get recommended. You know, I know a coach who works with trauma. He's the trauma coach guy, you know. I know a woman who works with people pleasers, you know, and I'll always remember her as somebody who specializes in helping people pleasers, you know, manage their people pleasing ways. And that's like, I also know she's got some other passions, but this is where she's focusing her marketing efforts on. And it's stuck in my head, you know, and it will forever stuck in my head. You know, whenever I meet a people pleaser in desperate need for help, I know exactly I'm going to send her to Helen Snape. You know, and that is fantastic for building a business. But like, I also know that, like, Vikki, I don't know what that one thing there is that I associate you with other than the hummingbirds. You know, but I know you, and I know what you stand for, and I know how you think and what your values are. So I would send somebody to you to work with you because I trust you, and I know you have multiple ways of helping them. But if they come with something very specific, and there's somebody that I associate as a specialist in that area, I probably would send them there first just because it makes sense, you know. But if I find somebody who's very aligned with your mission, I would send them to you. But like, that means, yes, it works. If you have one thing, it works. It's a matter of, well, you know, it's difficult. It's very tempting to focus on one thing. But if you're not so inclined, if that's just not the way you think, just don't make yourself miserable trying.
Yeah. Or like, for me, it also comes down to, you know, when people are talking about success, right? And often when you start unpacking what they're talking about there, they're talking about a level of financial gain, right? And I've had a number of people challenging this whole thing around, well, people with multiple passions, if we choose to follow all our multiple passions, we're never going to be successful. And I'm like, what are you talking about? When you talk about success, what are you talking about? And for whatever reason, and maybe it's coming out of the US, I don't know, but there's this wonderful magic thing around having a 6-figure income, right? And even in one of the groups within the community I belong to, or various communities I belong to, of people like us, it actually specifically, the question got put into a thread, you know, and it literally said, is there anyone in this group who earns 6 figures? And I took I kind of stepped back from it for a moment and said, do I even respond to this? And in the end, I thought, after I saw a number of the responses, there was this very strict, kind of across the group, and people who are responding anyway, we're all very much, no, it's never going to happen, you know, because, and I thought, right, I can't, I'm just going to say my thing. So in the end, I said, both myself and my partner are hummingbirds. We are both people with multiple passions. We've both had multiple careers. We've shifted, we've changed, we've morphed, we've done different stuff. I've moved around the world, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Both of us. are in roles which bring in 6 figures or more. You know, my business got to that for the first time last year, but prior to having a business, if I chose to go back into employment, I would step back into a 6-figure role because that's what I would be aiming at. But it comes down to make it, like you're saying, it comes down to really choices, right?
Would you be more successful if you had 6 figures, but you had what you described as like a mild depression?
Yeah, exactly. So it's what do you want in your life, and it's how do you want that life to be, and does having that 6 figures actually equate to being successful or happy? And that's one of the things I'm exploring, right, with people like yourself, that I have a really happy lifestyle now. I'm doing all sorts of things that I love. You know, my partner and I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff about both being hummingbirds when you're in a relationship, around, you know, and we have different forevers. So there's all sorts of negotiations, but any relationship has negotiations. But we're exploring at the moment, okay, well, where are we both going with what we're doing, and what comes next for you? What comes next for me? How do we do this?
Yeah. You have to be a lot more open to change, right?
Yeah. And in some respects, that's great because we're both open to change. It's part of the thing we both love. But one of the things we're also becoming more conscious about is that we're not doing change just for change's sake. Sometimes, you know, you get that kind of antsy feeling sometimes. And you're like, okay, I need to do something different. I need to do something different. When I was younger, before I did a whole lot of my own coaching, I used to just go, okay, press the big red button. Everything would explode. You know, and then I would go, oh, crap.
That's difficult for a partner as well, and friends, you know. All of a sudden you're changing your whole life around and everything changes. It's like, oh shit, she's just doing the relaunch thing again.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the other challenges that people talk about is long-term connection, you know, evolving long-term connection, whether it's in an intimate relationship or whether it's friendship or even family. You know, they talk about the challenges some of them have with family. And I know that at certain times I've had challenges with family members going, well, will you just settle down? And what I found, Gareth and I both found really interesting when we bought this house, was the number of our friends and family who've known us both for a long time saying, well, now that you're settling down, and we're both going, we've bought a house, right? We're not settling down. We've bought a house.
Yeah, look, I mean, I just got married. And then you start thinking in many different ways. And I had a bit of a panic moment at some point. It's like, oh, what the hell am I committing to? This was like a process I went through before I asked her to marry me, because like that commitment is really difficult for somebody who's got multiple passions. I'm not talking about multiple passions for other people, but like, if you know you're somebody who explores something in depth and really throws themselves in, and then goes to explore other things and perhaps push that red button, you know, how many multipotentialites or multipods, hummingbirds get divorced because they just want to throw themselves into something else, you know? So I had to go through a process of like, okay, how, like, if I commit to this, I commit to this for life, you know? I needed to think about whether I'm able to actually do that. And that scared me for a little while. But then what was created in my mind, I had that image of a tree building roots, but the tree is very elastic. The tree and the branches of the tree can go all over the world and do all kinds of different things. It just means you have a base where you've grounded in, where you've rooted in, you know, and like a safe haven, but from which you can explore the world, and then always come back to your safe haven. You know, I can live many of my multiple passions, you know, within that safe haven of that relationship. And my partner allows me to explore all of these different things, you know, just not all of these different people. But that's perfectly fine with me.
But it is that thing, isn't it? I imagine the two of you have had to have quite a lot of conversations about what this looks like for both of you. Right?
Yeah, and you mentioned that with family, sometimes it can be difficult. I found it much more difficult with friends. Okay. Because family is something that really is tied in with you. At least the way that I approach family, you know, I'll never lose touch with my family. There's always going to be that relationship. And if I do different things, they're just like, okay, yeah, like Yannick, there's something completely different now. But like, I did bring it together under a certain umbrella, which kind of worked, which makes more sense. But like I found it much more difficult with friends because I have so many different friends in so many different kind of circles from so many different countries and continents and mindsets. Like it's always been a challenge when I always, like even when I was young, when I was like 16, it started already that I invited people to a party, and then there was the people who listen to drum and bass, and there's the people who listen to hip hop, and there's the people who listen to hard rock. And like musically, what are you going to listen to that everybody's kind of happy and going to stay? Because like at that time you're a bit more opinionated and a bit less tolerant, perhaps. So there was plenty of times where the drum and bass people would just move on to a different party just because they didn't want to listen to rock anymore, or vice versa. So to bring different people together, that's why the wedding was so profound, because all of these different people came together under a certain umbrella. And everybody celebrated together. It was fantastic. But like, sometimes you throw yourself into something and you surround yourself with the people that are interested in the same things, and you spend a lot of time with a certain group of people. And by definition, you neglect, or you have less time for the people that you spent time with before.
Yeah.
So I think we need to make more of an effort than perhaps other people to maintain relationships. And that can be really difficult. Because like I've always envied the people who tell me, oh, well, these are my friends and I've known them all for like 30 or 40 years. We've been together since high school. We always hang out, and I think particularly something cultural in the UK as well, where the groups grow together. And once they've grown together, they tend to stay together. You have to work quite hard to find yourself into circles. In Latin America, for example, people are generally immediately welcoming you into the group. And then, well, you can screw it up fairly quickly. But here I found you have to work quite hard to find yourself into circles, be accepted, build trust. And to build trust and be accepted, you have to show up a lot.
Yeah.
And if you have other interests, especially in a city like London, where there's so many different things going on every single day, it's difficult to show up on a very regular basis with the same people, at least for somebody with multiple passions.
Yeah, and I've definitely struggled with that. I mean, I've explored this quite a lot because, not only as an adult have I moved a lot, changed careers, done lots of different interests. As a child, I went to 7 schools as a child. And I mean, a bit like you, I've got friends now. I mean, Gareth's one of them, who have people in their lives that they've known since they were 6 that are not relatives, right? And I'm like, I don't have that. I literally, anyone who's in my life from my early childhood are related to me in some shape or form. I'm like, okay, so what? And yet I have some really strong friendships that I've built from university through as an adult that I have consciously built.
Yeah, just I rarely see them, but when we do, it's pure love, right?
Yeah, and what I've come down to, I've landed on, is for us, it's about the quality of that connection,
right?
Not the quantity of that connection. And like one of my closest friends is the worst communicator in the world. And I've fallen into that.
We have the same friend.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about you, Claudio.
And she's in New Zealand, and she's not particularly on social media, and and from between my visits, pretty much we might exchange an email once a year. Like it just doesn't happen. But when I go to New Zealand, I usually stay with her and her husband for a week.
Yeah.
I base myself with them. They let me just come and go. And I make and the quality, and it's like we step back into that level of discussion, that exploration of life, that connection that we had, but it's because we hold on to one another lightly. I've when I listen to some people talk about not having friends, what they're looking for is to be part of that core group, like that TV program, Friends.
Yeah.
6 who just lived in each other's houses pretty much.
How does that shape our mind of what friendship means?
Yeah, and I looked at it and went, hold on a second. And I have been part of groups like that before, and I've gone, yeah, it didn't work. And it didn't work because, and it's not that we consciously go in to do this, right? But we're curious. So friendship circles like that do things like they've always done them. like you're saying, they'll have certain things they always do. They'll go to certain places all the time. They'll, et cetera, et cetera. And when I've been part of that group for the first month or so, or even the first year, I'm quite happy to cruise along with that because it's all interesting and new and fun for me. And then I'll start saying, well, why don't we do something different? And
different.
yeah. And they suddenly become uncomfortable. And it's not that you're wanting to make them uncomfortable. It's just they have the way they do things, you know.
Yeah, true.
And so there's something there. And what I've learned is, rather than trying to be part of a group, for me, it's about having a number of quality people in my life that I have a quality relationship with. And they may know each other because of me, but I don't expect them or require them to be.
I think what's important is that your friends know you, and that if they can't perhaps pick it up on it, you know, make it vocal. I mean, it can be a courageous thing to talk about it, but like, I think it's important that you show your friends who you are and how you approach life and relationships, and that it really doesn't mean that just because you're not around so much that you like them less in any way. And I know some of my friendships have broken down because probably that person built some resentment because I wasn't really showing up that much, and I didn't get in touch as much as their other friends. And we get so wired in the way we grow up, and if we watch Friends and How I Met Your Mother, about these groups of friends that always stay together and spend every day together and always go to the same pub, you know. And it's important that we are vocal about, look, that's not how I approach life, and I would get a bit bored. You know, it has nothing to do with you. I absolutely love you. I have a group in the UK that I feel very much a part of, you know, and I have so much love for them. But then, no, Yannick does a lot of other things, and he sees a lot of other people, and professionally he's doing so many different things, and you know, a lot of them work in a similar industry, so they naturally spend a lot of time together. And if they don't see me for quite a while, they know I don't love them less, you know. They know I consider them my core group of friends, you know. But they also know that I just do these other things, and just because I don't show up regularly, it doesn't mean I'm not less part of that group. And I think if you find a group that accepts you in the way that you are, like that, you know, they don't try to own you and all of your weekends. They're able to share you with other friends that they might not even know. That's why it was so important to me and so meaningful that I brought these different friends together. So they're like, I didn't realize how few of them had actually met between each other, you know, just because they're so all over the world, and there was just never an opportunity. And all of a sudden I see like 2 or 3 of my friends that had never met get along so well, and they're like, you're that person over there that Yannick talks about, blah, 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 you know. And all of a sudden they come together. It's like, what a beautiful connection. So I think it's important we talk to our friends about being quite open about being hummingbirds.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of it comes down to that, doesn't it? Is the sooner you step into owning who you are and what that means, and not only some of the core aspects that make you a hummingbird, but also all of us then have our own other strengths, you know, like you and I both happen to be people, but not all hummingbirds are people, right? And that's cool. And that doesn't mean you're not a hummingbird, it just means that all of us are individual human beings with different strengths of different levels. And the sooner you own and understand who you are and step into that and really kind of celebrate it, like I'm very big about celebrating your strengths and being clear where your gaps are and making a choice about how you fill those gaps. You know, it doesn't have to be that you need to be brilliant at everything. You know, for me, it's very much around, I know I am never in a million years going to be a detail person. Particularly bureaucratic detail. I am just not. And so, but I know that, but I also know there are people who love that stuff, which I don't get at all, but I need them in my life, and I can have a relationship with someone who loves it. You know, and so professionally, personally, whatever, it means that I have, we as a team, as a group, as a set group of people, we can do so much more, right? It's
amazing. It's amazing when you find somebody who's like who's at the opposite end of a spectrum of the many spectrums that we have. For example, when I met, I don't want to say met, but like when I got in touch with the work of Tim Ferriss, and I've watched more and more of his podcast, and I read more of his stuff, and I've seen like I feel I know the guy just because I spent so many hours with him and other people talking without being part of the conversation. But I was part of the conversation in a way because it's really engaging. But it's very clear he has the very similar kind of character profile, if you wanted to put it like that, like in terms of MBTI or like, because we're very similar, but the difference is I'm very big picture and he's very detailed.
Yes.
You know? So I feel a very strong connection. But I'm very I'm almost jealous of his attention to detail and the way that he can like have journals and take notes and measure everything and measure all the outcomes, you know. But at the same time, I think it's easy for us human beings in general to see somebody else's strength and be jealous of it or be admiring of it and give ourselves less credit for the strengths that we have, because that big picture thinking is a huge strength. And I realized that luckily quite early in my life, you know, and then you can make decisions on what kind of career you choose, or within that career, what kind of passions you pursue within that kind of strength profile. I mean, that's why a lot of the strength research and positive psychology is so important, you know, because being a multipotentialite has been seen as something that's in the way of a successful, flourishing career, and actually can really, really, really help you. Because more and more organizations realize we need people who study the foundations of the forest. We need people to integrate, to look at different areas within the company or within a different field, or even look at completely different fields and take transfer the learning and the skills into the field that they're working in. And that's how you innovate. You know, there's a brilliant TED Talk. I forgot who it was by. He owned a tech company. And they started hiring philosophers and artists and social scientists and musicians because they have a different way of thinking that they bring into the organization. And there's a whole story involved of how the organization was almost done because they were about to lose their biggest client, the client that kept them alive. And they realized they couldn't solve their problem, so they would lose them tomorrow. You know, there's a meeting tomorrow. And then they went drinking at the bar. And the bartender was a philosopher that they had a relationship with. And then one was joking and it's like, hey, why don't we send in Dave or Ted or I don't know, half jokingly. And then they're like, yeah, why not? And then they talked to Ted or Dave and he's like, yeah, okay. And he went in as a philosopher and like came out 5 hours later and had completely restructured what that product that they were supposed to want actually looks like. So then they were actually able to build it and the whole company thrived. And now they're hiring quite a percentage of people from the social sciences.
Exactly. And it's one of the things we bring often is the fact that we already have perspectives from those very different ways of thinking, right? And certainly one of my top skills as a consultant is I go into organizations and they'll say, here's where you're going to be working and here's your problem. And I go, what else is going on? And I find out what else is happening within that organization and, like you're saying, outside the organization. And then I go, okay, let's start introducing. And I often discover that this person over here has never spoken to this person over here and they haven't talked to that person over there. And I'm like, but you're all struggling with the same challenges, but you've all taken different approaches and let's bring you together. And, you know, and that's something I think, well, certainly those of us that are people are very good at doing, is bringing different perspectives into the same room. And that's where innovation happens, right? It's through diversity, is exactly what that guy is saying. And I'm really aware of time, my friend.
Oh, right. Yeah, it must have been quite a while.
And I'm absolutely sure that we could continue doing this all day, but we're not going to. So any final hints or tips from your own experience that you would want to share with other people with multiple passions around the world?
Well, know yourself, you know, know yourself to an extent where you can make important decisions based on who you are, not who society wants you to be. You know, we're still primed towards becoming masters, and you can be a different sort of master. So if you haven't worked with a coach or therapist or even a good friend, like figure out who you are, what your strengths are, and then make the important decisions based on that. That would be my advice.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Yannick.